again. Just before we actually continue, I just thought I use these pictures to show you something. This property here, can you all see my screen right now?
Yes.
This is your partner, yeah. Okay, this picture, or these pictures here actually is a very good story behind these pictures, why I have them here. If you look at it, starting from the top where I'm showing you this picture, if you look at this picture here, it's very bright. This picture here is really dark. This picture here is very bright. This picture is very dark. We have many people tend to also ask me, what does Midas actually do? Midas Property Group works in partnership with auction house to put on these events. Apart from putting on these events, we trade a lot of properties with auction house, where we get our clients to trade with auction house, or we actually help our clients acquire properties from auction house. This is one of the stock that is on the auction today, which we actually enlisted with auction house. I had a call from auction house to actually to get to give them some more pictures. So this is in Rigmansworth. It's not too far from where I live. So I drove to this property at 5:30 p.m. and I took pictures. These are the pictures on my right hand side. The picture on my right hand side, at the top right hand side, this is Gibbs. For those of you that are familiar with Rigmansworth, this is right at the junction on the high street going to the council and the station. It's a great location for anyone that wants to do an office to resi property strategy. So I came in there for 5:30 to take the pictures. These are the pictures that I took for the office building. On the left, the lower one, and on the top, Gibbs across. Why is the office really dark and Gibbs very bright? Because when I send these pictures through to auction house publishers, they say the quality was not good enough for publication. I did everything I could, and I couldn't get the quality of the picture to be any better. What I did, I went home, slept, got up in the morning, 8 o'clock, came back and took this one that I have at the top, which was better. And if you look at the Gibbs down on the bottom right hand side, it looks darker because the sun at 5 o'clock actually is coming from the west, which makes Gibbs brighter than the office building that I wanted. But in the morning, when the sun is coming from the east, it makes this building brighter than Gibbs. So the moral of this story is that at times we might be trying too hard. This is two sets of pictures taken by the same photographer, but with the same camera, the same skills, but one taken in the evening is brighter than the one taken in the morning. So at times in life, when we try things, we shouldn't give up. Maybe it just means we just take a break and then try again later. So that, I hope, is a motivation story. But most importantly, this is on auction today. For anyone that's looking for office to resi project, I would strongly recommend you look at this lot number. Actually, what lot number is it again? So it's a great one for you to look at. Okay, then in terms of our upcoming events, this week, Thursday at 7:30, we'll have an event coming up between 7:30 p.m. and 9:30 p.m. That will be myself and maybe one or two guests undecided yet. Will just be a very casual conversation about Midas, what we do, and investment strategies. But most importantly, we'll seek to answer all your questions if you have any questions on that day. Then, most often, people tend to ask the question, how is the market right now? This again is one of the questions that we have to answer every event. Just give an analysis of where the market is. Right now, as you all know, the last 3-4 months, or 3 months exactly, the property market, as the general public knows it, the estate agents were shut down, even though the auction companies continued to function very much in some normality, i.e. going online as we do today. The reason why, of course, for COVID, we cannot have this auction event in a room and the auction, but the auction companies have managed to keep a normality of getting stock in the market. The catalogs are slightly smaller than normal, but that the market has not really been affected that much, especially the investment market. However, the owner occupier market is quite restricted because of the viewing issues that we've been experiencing. But we hope with the market gradually coming back to normal, with the estate agents coming back on the high street, we expect by end of this week, we should have instructions from Downing Street for viewings to actually continue very much normal. So in terms of our panel today, so that I'll introduce our panel today. Our keynote speaker today, Aisha Ofori, is someone we've been trying to track her down for a very, very long time right now. This event was actually planned to be in the summer. We planned this from last year. We wanted a nice event this summer. The vision was that we'll all be down in the hotel, in the big room with a few hundred people, having a nice summer there, but it hasn't happened. So we like to thank her for still keeping the commitment, even though we couldn't go down to the hotel room. She's a founder of 3 property businesses, which I tend to let my speakers really introduce themselves properly when they come on board. She's made a perfect transition from a professional career to properties. So we are hoping that today, Aisha, you will tell us how well you've done, how you've managed to actually make that transition from a full-time day job into property investing. We hope most of our audience are full-time property investors, and a lot of people that are doing it part-time in jobs that will be looking for the inspiration from yourself to know how to actually move in. When I will call you up to start your presentation, that you can go through more details about yourself. Our second, after you, the next person that we have on the panel is Dolapo Oni, again, a property investor, entrepreneur that's made a good transition as well from the corporate world into property investing. She would explain a lot more about her professional details when she actually comes on. Again, today is really about sharing your inspirational stories, how you've made it from the 9 to 5, which I think 9 to 5 is all proverbial. I know you were more like 9 to 9, but yeah, how you've actually made that transition from your 9 to midnight or whatever shift you were doing in your professional lives into the property investment world. We had 1 or 2 other panel members that could not make it today for unforeseen circumstances, which we could not control. So what we're going to happen today is that we'll have Yasmin that will be in the background as a legal person. If there's any specific law question, don't be shy to ask. I will be on as a moderator, and I will double up as a panel member. If you do have any question on auctions or auction process, I will take those questions on the auction. We've already got quite a few questions that have been emailed to us, so we will actually start with those ones. And again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat, or you put it on the Q&A, or you send them through to myself or Artie. We'll take your questions on. So without much further ado, we will still have enough time to actually talk just after doing the Q&A. So what I'm going to do, I'll stop sharing my screen right now and then let Aisha take over and start with a keynote speech. Okay, so I'll stop my sharing.
Wonderful, thank you so much.
Yeah, so Aisha, please just be more expansive and explain a lot more about yourself. I don't like to duplicate that process, because I think you could do a much better job than I would ever do. Okay, thank you.
Let me get this tech working. Can you see my screen? Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay,
Yes,
wonderful.
Yes.
So thank you so much, Sam, for inviting me on. Excuse the background noise. As mentioned, I had a career in finance, and I transitioned completely into property. But I'll walk you through sort of my journey, how I did it and how I got there. Just one question, is the background noise too distracting or is it okay?
I think it's okay.
Okay, wonderful. So here is, I guess, a sort of timeline of my journey, and this explains a little bit about me. So who am I? I was actually a physicist at undergrad. I'd always been a sort of curious person trying to figure out, more about the world. I was always very good with math and with numbers. And so physics was a sort of logical choice for me when I was at university. When I went to university, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I had never heard of an investment bank, let alone know what one was. And it wasn't until the banks actually came on campus at university that I sort of got my first interaction to the world of banking, if you like. And I started to do a bit of research around that. And I said to myself, oh, that sounds, quite interesting. I had quite a lot of student debt at the time. The banking salaries paid well. So I thought, that sounds like it makes sense as a sort of career choice. And I guess the thing about banking, which worked for me, is that they didn't necessarily expect you to have any sort of banking or accounting knowledge. They basically said, if you're keen to learn, we can teach you everything that you need to know. So upon graduating university, I joined Morgan Stanley in their investment banking division. I was a generalist working across various different sectors. And this was pre-2008 when I joined, and I actually had a great time. I joined in the M&A division, working very long hours. We rarely finished before 3 a.m. Then you'd have to be back in the office by 9. I worked weekends. I never took a holiday. I tried to take one once and it was cancelled. And despite the intensity of it all, I actually really, really enjoyed it. That was pre-2008. When Lehman went under, and even a little bit before, you could start to sense things were changing. But for me, the sort of critical day was Lehman. And thereafter, everything was just very, very different. It wasn't a pleasant place to be, and there wasn't really any business to be done. We'd still be working, still be pitching, but nothing was really getting done or sort of going through. And I started to sort of think, well, what else should I be doing now? This doesn't really feel like the right place to be anymore. So I tried a few other things, but fundamentally, I went back to what I loved doing, which was studying. So that's when I went to London Business School and I did the 2-year MBA program. That really, I think, was a turning point in my life in terms of me starting to think about other things outside of the corporate world. And I think that's really where I'd say the sort of entrepreneurial spirit was sparked in me. And it was at that time that I started to think, about other options other than just working for organizations and potentially one day working for myself. But at that point, I didn't really have anything in my life that I was particularly passionate about that I wanted to start my own business in. And, although a 2-year MBA program sounds like quite a lot of time, I had to make a decision quite quickly about what I was going to do after the MBA. And as finance was, what I knew, I went back into finance when I finished and I joined Goldman Sachs. I joined Goldman Sachs as an ultra high net wealth advisor. So what that means is I was responsible for managing and looking after and investing the wealth of the wealthiest individuals in the UK and in Ireland. I loved my job, fantastic opportunity. I got great exposure to a lot of different people, fundamentally meeting people that I never would have met otherwise. So my job was, really, really fascinating for me. And I was at Goldman for 6 years. I, did relatively well. I was promoted. But I'd say a few things started to happen when I was at Goldman. I had a little bit of money aside from working. My now husband, then boyfriend at the time, also had some money. And I said to him one day, look, we need to invest our money. I had come across property from somebody else that I had met who'd been investing in property for a long time. And we started to, or I started to look at, you know, what property investment meant, how I could get into property investing whilst also working. Long story short, it took me a bit of time to convince my husband, but eventually we started investing in property ourselves and building up a portfolio. So we started with buy-to-lets, HMOs, we did some development with JV partners, but I'll come on to all of that a little bit later. So fast forward from sort of where I was at Goldman, building my sort of property portfolio on the side, I got to a point in my life where several things had happened, you know, and they sort of all came together at the same time. And I made the decision that, you know, it was the right time to leave Goldman and to go into property full time. I'll come back to sort of the, I guess, what happened next in my property today, but I want to just jump forward a little bit. I left Goldman Sachs officially, when was it? 2018. So I've been in full time in property for almost 2 years now, and it has been an absolutely tremendous journey. Again, I'll go into some of the details, but you know, in the sort of 2 years that I've been in full-time property, a lot has happened. Last year, I won the Women of the Future Award for Real Estate, Infrastructure and Construction. I was also named one of Management Today's 35 Women Under 35. I was named a Property Week Resi Trailblazer. I featured in The Telegraph, in Business Leader. And earlier this year, Imperial College London gave me their Emerging Leader Award. And that's for the work that I do with Propel Network. But again, I'll come on to that now. So what do I do? I'm full-time property, but I wear several different hats, if you like. One of the things that I'm really passionate about, you know, as well as continuing to build my property portfolio, is about, you know, sharing property knowledge. But more importantly, I say it's using property as a tool to financially empower people. And that's fundamentally the premise behind two of the businesses that I run, Propel Network, which is a property investment community for women. So it's for women who either are already in property, they're already experienced, but they want support. They want to work with other people. They want to share the knowledge that they have, because sharing, you know, experiences, what works, what didn't, is so incredibly important, I feel. But Propel is also for women who are getting into property, who aren't necessarily sure about, you know, what strategy is suitable for them, or sort of the various different paths that they want to follow. I also run another community called Black Property Network. That is focused on the Black community and other minority communities, similar to Propel in terms of it's for people who are either in property or want to get in. It's about sharing knowledge. It's about learning. It's about, you know, trying to overcome those struggles in property that we all inevitably face, finding funding, various things like that. And for me, you know, those two businesses are what I call my passion businesses. Those are the ones that, you know, for me are the ones where it's not just about running them as businesses, but for me, it's about, you know, being able to give back and giving me purpose in my life. You know, one of the reasons I left Goldman Sachs is because I just got to a point in my life where I didn't feel I had much purpose in a sense of giving back. Yes, I was making money for my clients, but if my client had £100 million and I'd made him another sort of 25 million, okay, he can buy a bigger boat or something like that. But I felt that there was more that I could do to help people where the help I gave them would be more impactful in their lives. And that's one of the key sort of theses for Propel and for Black Property Network. The final hat that I wear is to do with funding. So given my background at Goldman Sachs, essentially, you know, I was a wealth manager, but one of the key skill sets of my business is fundraising. So fundraising is something that I like to do and that I feel I can do quite well. So when I transitioned into property, one of the first businesses I set up was is called Axiom Property Partners. And that's about helping developers or those in property who need funding for their businesses, connecting them with high net worth individuals, who are looking for great investment opportunities, who don't necessarily know where to find them or which are necessarily the ones that they should be looking at. And I'm sort of that conduit. So when I started out with Axiom Property, because it wasn't an FCA regulated business, I could only work with one client or one investor into an equity deal at a time. If I were to pool assets, it would be what's called a collective investment scheme, and that's regulated activity, which I couldn't do. So I was working one client at a time into deals. But what I realized was there were people out there who had smaller sums that I had at that point been turning away because I didn't have the FCA umbrella to work with many people at the same time. So I started to look at the property crowdfunding model, which where you can pool sort of lots of people's money together, and that's done under an FCA umbrella. And I realized that if I had something like that, then it would allow me the opportunity to do much more and to get many more deals funded. So at the moment, I am essentially merging my business, if you like, with a property crowdfunding business to get those capabilities. And I'm very excited about that opportunity because I feel that just having an FCA regulated platform just will allow me to do so much. As you may tell, all of the sort of businesses that I run, they're all interlinked in some way, and they're all to do with property. A friend of mine said to me recently, you know, Aisha, I think you're a bit crazy. Why on earth would you run 3 businesses? You know, you went to business school. One of the things that they teach you is to focus on one thing and do it well. Why are you running 3? It's not, my answer was, it's not as if I'm, you know, a doctor, an accountant, and a solicitor and trying to do 3 separate jobs all at the same time. Fundamentally, all of my businesses are about property. They just all do slightly different things, but they're all sort of interlinked and intertwined. And for me, I think each of those pieces are really important when anybody is starting out in their property journey or even already in property. You need knowledge. Yes, you can start in property without it. When I started, I didn't really do any training. It was sort of just figuring things out on my own. But we, you know, my husband and I, we made a lot of mistakes. We actually did a calculation recently where we looked at all of the mistakes that, mistakes that we felt we had made, and we calculated how much that has cost us in money. And it was a lot. So with hindsight, you know, maybe had we taken some education or had we even spoken to more people who were doing similar things at the same time, we could have avoided some of those mistakes. You know, the way I see property is, you know, there are lots of people who've done it, who have the experience. Why not leverage off of that? You know, there's no need to recreate the wheel. If somebody else is already doing something and they're happy to share, why not learn from them? And that's what, as I said, both Propel and Black Property Network is about. Propel is about providing that community, providing access to investment opportunities, and giving people access to various different types of property strategies, and the same with Black Property Network. So another question that I also get asked is to go into a bit more detail about my own personal property portfolio. So as I said, I have a portfolio of buy-to-lets and HMOs with my husband, and we've gone into some developments with JV partners as well. So here you can see some pictures of a project that we did with a JV partner who now we've known for sort of several years. It was a very, very interesting project. It did not go to plan at all. Lots of issues came up with this. We expected it to be a sort of 12-month project, in or out. We actually only finally sold the other unit this week. So the good news is that they've all been sold. I guess the sort of things that I wish had gone differently was just the time frame. This project took much longer than we expected, and that was fundamentally because, if you can see in the picture on the left-hand side at the top, it's actually a maisonette inside. So there's a ground floor flat and there's a top floor flat. So we bought the top floor flat, and then we converted the loft into another flat and renovated the one we bought, and then sold both of them. Getting the permission of the people who own the ground floor in order to convert and then separate the flats was an absolute nightmare. They, for want of a better word, tried to hold us hostage. So, I mean, I learned a lot of things on this project. One of them, I think, is, you know, try to negotiate, or what we should have done was try to negotiate with the people who owned the bottom before we purchased. Because had we realized they were going to be so stubborn and dig their heels in, it probably would have been better to move on and do something else. But again, I think every single, you know, development opportunity or property I buy, I say I'm still learning. I still learn something, despite the fact that I've now been doing this for several years. But I still enjoy it. I still enjoy being able to make homes for people. But more importantly, using my skill sets and the things that, you know, that I think that I'm good at, in terms of, you know, whether it be, you know, looking at the numbers, doing, you know, looking through the sort of Excel appraisals and things like that. Because, you know, going back to my background when I started my story, you know, maths was my thing. So it's actually the bit that I really, really love. Another project that we've completed, this was with 2 JV partners. This was a conversion of an office into 9 flats. Again, this project, very, very interesting. Lots of difficulties. I think working with you know, 2 JV partners is interesting. You know, they do say many hands make light work, but it also means then you have lots of different people with different ideas about what to do. This project, again, was also delayed, but delayed in several aspects. So delayed in sort of getting starting. We needed to apply for planning permission to make some changes to the outside. We actually changed the windows, because as you can see in the photo in the top left-hand side, the windows are actually very small and very high up, so they weren't suitable. So we had to apply for planning permission to change the outside. We changed all of the windows. We had wanted to drop the curb because there's parking space for some cars, but we put actually both of those things on the same planning application. And although they wanted to grant the application for the windows but not for the curb, they actually rejected the whole thing. So then we had to go back and apply just for the windows, and little things like that delayed the project. Again, with hindsight, if you think about some of these things, had we done certain things differently, some of those delays wouldn't have happened. There's also been delays in terms of you know, when we expected them to sell. I guess nobody really knew what the impact of Brexit was going to be. And just as Brexit started to get, or started to get sort of some clarity on what was going to happen, and a little bit of volatility started to come out of the market, we got into January, we were very positive, and then, you know, we had COVID-19. We're actually in a not too bad position with this one. Majority of the flats have been sold, there are only a couple left. So on the whole, I'd say it's been a positive project. It's been interesting, but absolutely with challenges and difficulties. And I think I'd say that's one of the things that I really stress to the members that we have within Propel Network and also within BPN. I have never had a property project that has gone smoothly. Things come up all the time. I'm constantly learning, but for me, what works is, you know, speaking to people who have, you know, who have done similar things before, asking them various questions. You know, I really find it useful in terms of sharing what I know with people, but also speaking to those who, you know, who have done things that I haven't, and learning from them. It's a continual learning process. But as I said, I very much enjoy it, and, you know, building my personal property portfolio is something that I'm continuing to do alongside running my other businesses, but I wouldn't be able to do any of those without having a team. I'm one person, there are only 24 hours in a day. So people say to me sometimes, how on earth do you do so much? I have fantastic teams of people who you know, support me. And without them, a lot of what I do wouldn't be possible. So I think I'm coming to the end of my my story. So I think what I'll do is I will stop there. I'm looking forward to taking any questions that anybody has. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for that inspirational talk. Do you want to just stop sharing your screen for me,
Yeah,
please?
I
Yeah.
will.
Okay, stop. Okay. Thank you, Aisha. We're going to come to a Q&A quite soon, as soon as we hear. Yeah, but just before we go to our next speaker, I've had quite a lot of people chat in about the auction lot that I put up earlier. So let me just share that and just talk through it for about a minute, because we do seem to have a few people on the group that have some cash in their pocket. They need to. By the way, your presentation was excellent, which we're going to actually deal with some of you've touched on quite a lot of things that actually have come up some of the questions, but I'm going to put them to you once we start. But just a quick one, let me just share a bit about the auction lot that I put up earlier, the one that we have on. Okay, I'm going to share my screen right now. Okay, let me look up for the that auction lot. Okay, got lot number 52. For those who've been asking asking what lot number is it, so let me share this. 25 rather, sorry. Sorry. Okay, so okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, you can see the screen now. Okay, yes. I think there's been quite a lot of questions in the chat asking about this lot. One of the things, I mean, the best feature about this lot is that I took this picture. Yeah, so whoever buys this lot can keep this picture for free, frame it and put it in your office. That was taken by Sam Fongho. I love the picture. But on a more serious note, this building is right in Rimansworth, next to Iceland. It's an office building which is vacant. It used to be a law firm. Now it's vacant. It's on 3 floors. It would qualify for an office to resi conversion project. And the beauty of this project is that it's a small project, perfect for someone that wants to move into office to resi conversion as a first project. This was, I mean, the risk level is so low for this kind of project that it's a perfect project for anyone to jump onto. Again, why I thought let me do it now is because with online auctions, you have to actually register to be able to bid. The auction will start at 12 o'clock. So if anyone that has been asking for how much this can go for in the chat, if you really want to bid for this property, you need to get off the system right now and get off this webinar, and then call auction house directly right now and try and get your bidding form done. You can click on this button to see the legal pack. I'm not a lawyer. We'll have a great lawyer on the panel, but I can tell you that I've checked the legal pack. It's good. I haven't seen any reason why you shouldn't buy it, but that doesn't mean that this is not legal advice. But I haven't seen any reason why you shouldn't buy it. It's actually the guide price is $1 million, which has been reduced from 1.1, so it's come down to $1 million. And I think there will be quite a lot of off-takers. It's a perfect place for office. You can do a mixed use where you can do ground floor as offices and then do the top 2 as maybe studios, HMO or flats, or you can actually, because of the class of office that this is, it actually qualifies for you to convert all of it as residential if you so wish to do so. So, okay, so I think on that note, I'll just let people who have an interest in this lot to go and check it out by themselves. And by the way, there are other great lots on the auction side. So just look at all the other lots. And if you do want to bid, just call the company and register yourself. There are quite a few people online waiting to get you registered so that you can bid at 12 o'clock. So on that note, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And okay, our next panelist, I can't see her on the screen.
You can't see me.
Oh yes, I can see you now. Dolapo, yeah, I think I just couldn't see you on my chat. Yeah. So again, I'm not going to label the introduction because I know you're going to do a much better job than myself. Again, great transition from the professional world to property. I will let you share your screen and go through your presentation. So.
Thank you, Sam. Thanks very much. Let me just make sure. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen. Yeah, I can see.
Okay,
So, yes.
great. All right, thank you. It's really great to be part of this event, partly because I actually really do like the pre-auction events. I've told quite a lot of colleagues of mine and people that are interested in property that they should always attend the pre-auction event for the auction house, because you get quite a lot of information from the panelists. You also get you have the chance to ask as many questions as you like. And the first one I went to, I really enjoyed it. I think that's the one where Jay, and I can't remember the second fellow who presented, and they were amazing. So well done, Sam. I really like these events. And so it's quite an honor for me to actually be able to speak on this event as well. So I'm CEO of Citygate Property Development Ltd. And just to give some context into how I got down this path of property, in my family, we've always been quite, what do you call it, entrepreneurial. So my dad had his own business. So from when I was young, there was always this encouragement to think about what else you could be doing outside of your sort of day job. Now, interestingly enough, I still always wanted to work in corporate. It was always a dream of mine. I always wanted to have that city job and, you know, go to the city and work. So when I finished my undergrad, I went to the US, did my MBA, and then got a job with KPMG KPMG Consulting as a management analyst. And that went well. It was a good job. But then for me, staying in the US, while it was nice, it was a bit isolating just because I was so connected to family and very family oriented. So at some point I said, okay, let me come out to the UK and see how it is here. And I loved it. Everything about the UK just resonated with me somehow. And so eventually ended up staying here, got a job in the city again. And I worked with BP initially as an analyst, and then eventually became a project manager in that role. And also another great job, enjoyed it. But I think one thing that obviously stuck with me was the fact that I always knew I wanted to do something. I hadn't quite identified whether it was going to be property or what it was going to be, but I knew I wanted to be I wanted to have my own business. Now, interestingly enough, with trying to get into something else and work out what I wanted to do, while I was at work, I also realized something that wasn't going to work for me long term, was the fact that we had long hours, worked all the time. And I remember there was a project that I worked on that I traveled quite a bit for work, and I put all my effort into it. And in the end, that was the year where there was a crisis in the company, and there was a freeze on salary, on raises, pay raises, and I'd worked hard. That was supposed to be my promotion year. So for me, I just realized, combined with that and knowing I wanted to go into being an entrepreneur, I realized this isn't going to work long term. I need to start looking for something else to do. So I'd already started getting the education, just like what Aisha was saying. Just started kind of getting the education, getting an understanding of how the market, and of course, the UK goes gaga for property, right? So already there was a lot of talk about the property market, and it's one of those it's one of those industries that's very well talked about in the UK. So definitely my interest was piqued in that direction. But in 2005, 2006, which is when I really wanted to start getting into property, I felt, how it is where you just feel like there's so many people buying, there's so many people in the market at the time. I just felt like the prices were overheated. I didn't know anything about investing. I didn't know anything, but it's just a gut feeling that, the prices weren't working. I got a few offers of a few deals, and just the rental amounts and the price points of the property just didn't seem to make sense. And I guess it's a precursor to understanding how investment works and the way you buy a property, how you select the right property. Because at the time, even just looking at the numbers, it just looked like if anything goes wrong, then this deal isn't going to stack up. So that was in 2006, 2007. And then we had the financial crisis. So now I'm still at work. We have the financial crisis. And then I kind of went into, I thought if I didn't get into property then, because at this point I'd already been building up that track record understanding, I knew it wasn't going to happen, because at this point, prices were as low as they were going to be. Although I have to say, because I have a slide coming up about the differences between the two, and just to give it a context, I'm going to come back to that, but just to let you know that CEO founder of Citygate Property Development Ltd, that's now the company that I run. It's built up of our family portfolio as well as managed portfolio for our clients. And then Citygate Homes is more of the management side of the business. So we do a lot of is the agency. And, you know, I think when you're a property entrepreneur, you find yourself, just like Aisha said, your hands in different pots, in that it's all property related, but somehow there are multiple streams of income within property in itself. So we have the development company, which does all of the heavy lifting, the refurbs, the lofts, the developments, whatever it is that we're doing. But then we have the management side of it that manages all of that, manages the property portfolio, and then has started to expand to manage other people's portfolios as well. And then more recently launched a Property Mom podcast, just because, you know, when I got into property, at the time I was single, so I was able to work quite a bit, you know, hustle, do the grind. But as the kids started coming, it started getting very, very difficult to combine both. And my kids are still young. They're still, my son is 4, daughter is 2, and I'm still managing them as well as the business. So, you know, I started a podcast just to kind of talk more about property in all fairness, but sometimes I'll throw in a few of the issues, not issues, but some of the challenges that I have running the two. So yeah, so Citygate is the main company, that's the flagship company, and then we have I have a Property Mom podcast, which, as I just explained, and then more recently launched a membership for people who wanted to get into property. So the first program we did was creating your 6-figure business. And to be fair, you know, I always say that if you have 100K, you're starting out with, you know, a certain amount in your bank account, then getting 6 figures in property, getting 7 figures in property is not very difficult to do. But if you're starting with 0 and you really want to get on the market, then as it turns out, there are strategies now different from when I got in that you can get into that can get you on the property ladder. Not as an investor initially, but definitely getting you either in management, rent to rent, all these different strategies that teach you how you can start to get into property without having that much income. Now, I want to go a bit into some education, which is about how property generates income. Now, I know that we're talking to different sets of people. We're talking to people who are experienced. We're also talking to people who don't necessarily know how property investing works. An interesting point is that when I got into property, and I thought I'd gotten as much education, I had, like, when I compare what I know now to what I knew then, it's kind of ridiculous, because I got in thinking, well, I'm going to buy property, refurb, and then sell it on. So go to auction. So I've always been a big fan of auctions. Go to auction, buy this kind of property, and then remodel and then refinance it. That was a simple, in actual fact, I thought initially I'll do flipping. So just buy and sell, buy, refurbish, sell. And that was fine. I did that while I had my full-time job, and that worked well alongside. So I did about 3 deals before I decided, you know what, I'm done with all of this. I've already given you the context of why I was already getting a bit agitated with work. So by the 3rd deal, I realized I can leave this. I can move on to something else. Interestingly enough, just as I had moved out, I ran into my first ever investor just as I came out of full-time employment. So, you know, he ended up being one of my first investors. We did a few deals together as well. Now, the interesting thing is that while we were doing these projects, I then realized that as a full-time investor, one of the biggest gripes you have, especially starting out, is you'll have the pot of cash initially to get into an investment. So you're okay. While you're in an investment though, or in a project, you're a bit tight for cash. And so what then happens is, no matter how much you plan, there's always this fear at the back of your mind that if this project doesn't go well, or if I'm not able to sell according to my timelines, then what's going to happen? You know, so there was always this constant fear. So at some point I realized I'm going to have to come up with another strategy that works for cash flow. And this is when I started to kind of work out some of the other strategies that existed within property. So I guess when you're in it, then you start to become, your brain cells are really on fire. And then, so just to go over some of the different, so capital appreciation, you buy the property, you hold it, and then you make money off of when you sell it in the future. And then, or you can force the appreciation, which is one of the strategies that I use. It's vital that if you're a property investor, that you're not just buying a property to hold it, that you're making your money work hard for you. And then of course we know cash flow income, which is the rental income. But then more recently, or at least in the last maybe 5-6 years, there have been more aggressive strategies to make sure that you're getting more rental from, you're making your properties work harder for you. So HMOs, service accommodation, was very big in service accommodation as well. And then real estate services, so having an agency refurbs, interior decor, all those types of activities that also create the ongoing cash flow in the business. Because if you're creating a business, then you need to make sure that you have both the long-term strategies and then the short-term strategies that are keeping your business fluid. And then, of course, real estate related strategies is more of the rent to rent, the lease options, all these types of strategies that you can get into if you don't have that initial deposit to get into property. But those strategies still work in terms of creating that ongoing cash flow. So this is me on Homes Under the Hammer. A few years later, after I'd started this whole process, I'm pretty much, as I said, I'm an auction junkie. I'm constantly at the auctions looking for deals. And in fact, my first ever property that I bought in auction was a mistake property. I saw the price and I was like, this is ridiculous. This price is just too low. So this actually, I don't know why I'm so happy in this picture, because I ended up losing on that deal because the other person definitely wanted this property. But the good thing is that at least I have this sort of captured. So at the time, you know, I used to go to the auctions and just buy. And the reason why I'm saying why I have this slide on as 2008 financial crisis versus 2020 financial crisis, this 2020 COVID crisis that we're going through, is that it's quite different. You know, being in the previous market and knowing how that market was, you know, the big differences between the two: poor market fundamentals for 2008 versus now when we were coming into 2020, the year 2020, there's such a strong outlook. The market fundamentals were strong. Bank of England, they had lowered their rates drastically just to ease things when the original financial crisis started to take hold. But Bank of England interest base rates were already quite low coming into this crisis. So it's, you know, when you look at all the different measures, the palliative measures were towards the banks, then the palliative measures now have been more towards the individual businesses, trying to make sure that it's trickling down. Banks were not lending. I remember then somebody told me that if you can make it in property entrepreneurship in this market, then you will be successful, because it's been so difficult to get lending in the during the 2008 financial crisis. Now banks are still lending. There was a short freeze and during the lockdown, but banks are still on the market, and it's not been as difficult to get lending. Difference over in 2008 as well, there was lots of property stock. I remember then the auctions were just rife with property. We'd go into the auction with 300-400 properties just blasted into the market. Now, very limited stock. You have the 80, you know, like just under 100 properties. So there's a pressure on the market. The interesting thing as well is that the investment outlook in 2008 was very negative. In fact, I remember buying then thinking, this is very risky. There was this constant negative consumer attitude towards generally buying anything. So, but now even though there's still that trepidation as to, we don't know what's going to happen with the effect of the lockdown and the follow-on after the government withdraws the follow and all of that, but there's still a very strong investor sentiment, because everybody I know, foreign investors, people that I know, are all looking to get on the property ladder, because they found that property works out as a good financial strategy, either to replace your day income or as a long-term retirement plan. So the sentiment is definitely different. Sam, you just have to let me know once I'm going a bit over my time. Now, one of the reasons why I love the auction and why I've always bought in auction is because in a way you have a sense of...
Okay, you got a couple more minutes to round up then.
All right. So, so you have the auction precedes the wider market, in that, you know, once you go into the auction, once you see the trends that's happening in the auction, you can almost predict what's going to happen in the wider property market. Lots of benefits to buying in the auction. You get amazing timelines. You know, you can pretty much plan out your year once you're trying to buy in auction, but you have to understand how it works. It's not something you get into without, you know, it's not something you get into without understanding the ramifications of it. You also have to know the right strategy so that you can do the uplift. If you're an investor, you're trying to maximize your investment strategies. So you need to make sure that you are buying the right properties that will give you that additional income.
Yeah. Okay. Dolapo, do you want to go through some of the slides that you've done here, so that let's run through.
So just a quick case studies before I could just talk about property forever. So one of what I call my bread and butter deals, these are the deals that are just simple, you know, you're in within like 6 months. So it's a 1-bed refurb in a desirable area. It's you pretty much buy it, have it refurbed it costs about 25 to 30K to turn this around. Simple project, buy it at 400,000, revalued at 550. So you have that 150 uplift within 6 months, and then you pretty much refinance and take your money out for the, like, if you're into the buy, refurbish, remortgage strategy. So it's a simple deal that you can get into. And this is what it looked like after. Total cash investment was 160K, remortgaged out, and then you're able to reinvest the amount you're able to take out of it, which came out to 112,000 with an ongoing rental income of 1,900 per month. This was actually supposed to be serviced accommodation, which we eventually had to convert to a long-term rental. And then for the larger projects, we have the development projects where we do the rear extension. And this was actually quite a cheap property. It already had planning, 300K in the auction. Refurb cost came to 80K because we had to do the extension as well as do the internal. We valued 12 months later, because the work took quite a while, at just under 500K. So the uplift was almost 200K, and we're able to extract from this property pretty much everything. I think we had about maybe £10,000 left in this property, but the ongoing rental with this property is 2,100 a month. So it works out to be quite a simple project that you can get into. It doesn't take too long, but you know, it works in terms of the financials because you're able to extract most of your money and move into the next project. And so that's pretty much, it's purchase to refinance, usually takes 9 to 12 months for the larger projects. For the smaller ones, it takes just under 6 months. And then the latest project that we're working on now is a church that we bought all the way up in Northeast. And we're working with the council now to try and figure out what exactly works for the environment, because it's located right in the city center, and we're trying to work it out as part residential and part commercial. So that's the latest project. And then pretty much for me, it's reach out to me if you have any questions about property. You know, property is a life-changing business. It definitely intertwines with your life, but it's one that, you know, is very rewarding. So thank you very much, Sam. That's the end of my presentation.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Dolapo. If you can just stop sharing your screen from that end, and we can